Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the news behind the news with Ralph Cantava on Mix 94.7 FM. I hope that you had a good day so far. This afternoon, we will be diving into the world of arts. And I'm glad to have a gentleman who is here before me, who is a star. He's making a lot of great moves here on the island ever since, he touched down, from graduating and stuff. He's just been going and going. So I do hope that you're taking much needed rest.
Trying.
But with that, I'm also glad that we actually work together as far as the Melee podcast is concerned. And so the gentleman I have before me is, drum roll, Mr. Jonathan Van Arneman. What's up, Jonathan?
I'm good.
Thanks for coming on the program.
I'm good, for sure. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So one thing I love about you is that there's a level of mystery to you in the sense of, I think if people meet you, they wouldn't think, one, that you study economics, and that there's this very passionate, yes, but I would even say revolutionary spirit within you. But that, you have a deep care for society, and a great teaching ability. So we'll definitely get into all of that. But yeah, for those, of course, who may not know you, could you tell us about yourself? I'm curious as well, in particular, about your story, on growing up in St. Martin.
Sure. Okay. So that was quite the introduction. Yes, I tend to hide my revolutionary side quite well. For those who know me, it definitely pops out, but it's not something that I wear on my sleeve. So my name is Jonathan Van Arneman, known to some as AJ. And I grew up for the most part on St. Martin. I was not born here. I was born in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I lived in St. Thomas for the first 3 years of my life. Then we moved to St. Croix. That's where my family lived. And then we moved to St. Martin when I was 7. So at the age of 7, I started attending the Mac School, Campus 1, of course. We'll always rep Campus 1.
For sure.
And my little sister was in your class.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it was 4th grade and 5th grade, if memory serves correct.
Crazy.
Small world.
Small world, for sure. And then after Mac, I went to St. Dominic, where I did my 5 years there. And then after graduating, I left. Yes.
And you left immediately?
Pretty much, yes. So if you know the CXC schedule, you usually sit your final exam in May or June, and then you don't get results until December. So I was actually gone before I got my CXC results. So pretty much immediately, I went to Canada, and that's where I did 2 years. It wasn't exactly a university experience. It was International Baccalaureate, so it's IB. So it's 2 years of that, and then from there, I went to university, and university I did in the U.S.
Okay, and how was those 2 year, that 2 year period in Canada? Cold, yes, of course, but what was it like being that far?
It was quite a culture shock. I wouldn't change it for the world. I think my 2 years there really made me who I am. So just a little bit of context about the school. It's called United World Colleges. And that school, it pulls students from all over the world. So there's these things called national committees. And so each country has a national committee, and that committee is responsible for selecting students. And then they send these students to this school. So at my school, there are students from 80 different countries around the world. And so my roommates in my first year were from Argentina, Tanzania, and China. And me being from St. Martin, it's like I had to Google some of these countries. I never heard of these countries. I never heard of these languages. But it's like as these people become your friends, their issues also become your issues. Like you start caring deeply about the world and what actually happens in the world. And so it really, it changed my life in a way that made me care more about what was going on in the world and international affairs and how things affect each other. It's like a headline now all of a sudden has a face and a family to go with it. So it really connected the world in a way for me that that changed my life. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I know for us here, of course, we're used to diversity, although it's predominantly diversity within different people being from different parts of the region, and then Europe, and the West to extent. But I guess was that easy? Was it did this upgrowing here in St. Martin made it easy for you to connect with others? And I guess I would say, what was it like as far as competition? Because I do know that in the U.S., yeah, it's very competitive, but was it the same in Canada?
In Canada, the school, it's like you were doing the IB, and there was definitely that element of competitiveness, because at the end of the day, you're doing 2 years, and then you're trying to get into university, and these kids are like some of the top from their countries, like you're literally representing your country. And so these are the folks who are trying to go to Ivy Leagues. They're trying to get into all the top universities all around the world, not even just the U.S. Get into Oxford, get into Cambridge, And so I was not used to that. And I'm when it comes to academics, I'm really not that competitive. And I don't want to say it's because I don't care, but it's not the most important thing in the world to me.
Gotcha.
It's like I care about certain things, but in terms of grades were not really like my driving force. Like I'm not the kid who
I always thought otherwise.
right? I was really not the kid who's like I have to get an A. Like I have to it's like I try to do my best and I try to do well, but like I really was not. I mean, of course, it's not to say that like I didn't care, but it just wasn't my priority, And so I still ended up getting into a pretty good university. Like I still, I did okay for myself, but it wasn't like my driving force, like those kids who will make themselves sick over like not getting the grades, or they'll really go into depression if they're not doing well as they want to.
So I guess for you, I would say it's more about the value and experience opposed to the reward.
Yes, 100%. And it really led me to my understanding of institutionalization. I mean, a large part of it is I hate standardized testing. I do really badly at standardized testing. Like the SATs were like the worst experience for me. And people would spend like months, just like not even months, years trying to do well on the SAT. And the craziest thing for me is like it's not even a test of intelligence. It's a test of like how well can you take the test. So it's like you have people who, in my opinion, are not that smart, like doing way better than people who are way smarter and have way more interesting things to say. So I was just like, at the end of the day, like what test of intelligence is this really, And so that institutionalization and that standardization of testing, it was a turnoff for me, like a huge turnoff, because to me, it's just like, it was just making us into robots, but we weren't really producing anything of worth. So I kind of rebelled against that a little bit.
I hear you, but I guess that is really because that is what the economy of the time demanded, not necessarily individuality and value of one's expression and self-worth and all of that, but more so your ability to fall in line.
Yeah.
Which has now, that is definitely on its head, because with the content creator economy and so forth, that has changed totally. And you see, those very strong capitalistic, let's say guardians, recognizing that fact and making their adaptation to ensure that they can still benefit.
Yeah,
from
they're
that change.
trying to remain relevant. They're really trying, and they're
sometimes very cringy,
right? And you can see them. It's just like I'm glad that they're scrambling right now, because for so long it's just like things that don't even make sense. Things that just do not make sense. Like if I am going to try and go to a grad school program and I want to study, I don't know, if I want to go to divinity school, right? Why is it that to get into this program I need to sit the GREs in math and English? Like, how is it making sense? It's really, at the end of the day, it's all a business. It's all a money-making tactic, and this is like billions of dollars, because every single student who's trying to get into a U.S. school has to either do the SATs, the GREs, the ACTs, and it's dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from Canada, which school did you go to, and where did
So
you study?
from United World Colleges in Canada, I went to Macalester College in Minnesota. And I
Not too
have
many
to
people go
say,
there. How was that?
yeah, and Ralph, I'm not gonna lie to you, I did it on purpose.
Yeah, I figured so.
I I consciously decided to go to a place that had very few St. Martiners. Um, I don't know. I just felt like after living in Canada, where I was the only one, it was such a freeing experience in a sense. You know, it's like when no one knows who you are, who you're supposed to be, who, like, you have the ability to define yourself in a way that's very liberating. And I didn't want to lose that liberation. So I was like, you know what? If I go to Florida, like, there's going to be a St. Martiner on every corner.
Definitely, yeah.
You know, like, everything I do, they're going to say it to somebody. It's going to reach back home. Like, I'm going to, like, I was like, I don't want that. And so I chose Minnesota. And after maturing a bit, I did regret it. Just because, you know, you miss home, you miss customs, you miss culture. Like, you know, St. Martin's Day, I would try and make my little Johnny cakes, you know. But, like, no one really could relate to me,
yes,
you know.
yeah.
And so there were other Caribbean people there, but it really was a lonely feeling after a while. But it took me some time to get to that loneliness.
Yeah, I gotcha.
For a while, I was just reveling in it. The anonymity of just living, you know, a life where people don't have predefined notions of who you should be.
Yeah.
I really value that. But yeah, I did 4 years. My undergrad was in economics. I chose economics not because of, you know, any huge interest in money or anything like that. I was really interested in development. So developmental economics, specifically looking at developing countries and how the policies implemented there were either helping or hurting those countries. Because, I mean, I thought that it was really interesting, you know, just political economy in a sense. And my program, in a sense, did not deliver what I wanted it to deliver. And that's why I kind of fell out of love with economics. My program was very focused on very traditional capitalistic models of economics, to a point where a lot of the graduates ended up in Wall Street, you know?
Gotcha.
So it was more of like a
Feeding the hegemony.
yeah, exactly. Exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and I wasn't here for it. So and it's funny because you say like you're surprised I was an economics major. At my college and my university, I remember one time I took a geography course. And then the professor, he was great, and I did really well in the course. He was like, "Oh, like, what's your major?" And I was like, "Economics." He was like, "What? Like, you?" You know? So it wasn't a fit, but I needed to graduate on time.
Yeah, so it's like, well,
I
stick,
did it.
stick to
Yeah,
it. You stuck
I
to
stuck
it.
to it. I got my degree. And it wasn't all bad. I mean, I learned some really good skill sets in terms of, like, data analysis and using spreadsheets and all of those things that I
For
use
sure.
today. So, I mean, those were definitely good skills
Still
to
paid
have.
off overall.
It definitely did. But, yeah, it's not my cup of tea.
And so you see yourself going further to actually maybe do it to the level that you wanted to, as far as the developmental side of it, or are you kind of
No.
Cool.
No, I gave up on that.
Gotcha.
I realized that institutions are flawed, but not by accident. I think that they're flawed on purpose, and I, as what is the word that I'm looking for? As noble as it is to try to fix institutions and try to fix developmental policies, I feel like it's a waste. And I rather, you know, build my own things outside of institutions, outside of government policies, that can help to contribute and make more meaningful changes in people's lives. Because, yeah, governments are incredibly flawed. The system is incredibly flawed. Just the way that the world is situated and the way that certain countries have power over others, on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and there are very many checks and balances to keep it that way. It's like, fighting against that is, I don't know, that's not my fate.
Gotcha.
I
I
thought it
gotcha.
was, but it's not my fate.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm curious about is what was your way of seizing the moment? As you spoke about reveling in that space. And I ask that because I think one of the greatest advantages that we do have for us who leave the island is to, be at the top of our game, not necessarily for the sake of just having it on your resume, but for your personal development. Because truth is, still is that when you go to larger countries, whether it's the U.S., Europe, etc., there are opportunities that you just won't get being on an island.
Yeah.
And so, what was your way of, I guess taking the fruit of that land?
Sure. I mean, part of it was not having a choice.
That's
I
true.
was forced, like when I left the island, I was in Canada for 2 years on a full scholarship.
That's
And
great.
if I didn't finish those 2 years, I would have had to pay back that scholarship.
Oof.
Who doing that? So it's like you have better finish that 2 years and do it properly,
Yeah, for sure,
So
for
it's
sure.
like I knew that I didn't have any choice but to succeed. Same when I went to the US, it's like I'm in the US. I knew I had to graduate in 4 years. Study financing only gives you money for 4 years, And so if I didn't succeed, how was I going to pay the additional year? Like, if I wanted to change my major 3-4 times, how was I going? So
Yeah,
it's like part of it was I didn't have options.
That's true.
Like,
That's true. That's a good
I had
point.
no choice but to succeed, And it's like, so you have to just put yourself in that mindset of like, listen, you got to swim because you can't afford to sink.
True. Gotcha. So with that, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're tuned into the News Behind the News with Ralph Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. And this afternoon, I'm joined with Mr. Jonathan Van Arneman. So, we talked about your school experience, growing up on the island and so forth. But in the midst of all of that, I was actually surprised to find out you were a dancer. I guess, I never knew you to be in dance. So I'm curious about what piqued your interest in the arts.
I mean, that's a great question. I was surprised I was a dancer too. I think a lot of people were surprised. Growing up, I was always involved in arts, but my art was not dance. My art was steel pan. I was in the pan yard,
Gotcha.
from a very young age. I grew up playing as a part of the Ebony Youth Steel Orchestra under the leadership of the Mighty Dow. And so, I've always been exposed to art, and music was my outlet for a long time. But then I've always had an affinity for dance. I've always loved dancing. I don't think I had the courage to really pursue it while I was living here. There's a lot of stigma attached to male dancers, especially when we were growing up. It's gotten a bit better. But I mean, the stigma's still there. So when I left, I just happened to fall into company of dancers, and because I was around them and we were feeding off of each other, I learned so much from them, and they really instilled in me that hunger and that curiosity for movement. And then when I went to college in Minnesota, I took as many courses as I can. I was a part of a lot of different dance groups. And something that they always used to tell me is I have this one teacher. Her name is Sister Patricia Brown. She makes us call her Sister Patricia. Lovely lady. And so she always used to tell me like you have so much potential, like your body is so vast, like your lines are so long, but you have to use your length, And I was like, what does that mean? What is she talking about? And then I had another teacher, and he was like, oh, you have to like use your length. And I was just like, what are these people talking about? Like, I don't know. Everyone keeps talking about my potential. Like, is this ever going to be more than potential? Because nobody wants to be that person who has the potential that's never realized. And so I kept working at it. And then, finally one day things just clicked in. Like, it was a lot of failure, not going to lie. It was a lot of failure. It was a lot of hardship. But yeah, one day it clicked and I realized that I like using dance as a tool because I'm very brainy. Like there's a lot of stuff going on up there, you know. And I realized dance as a form of communicating stories and narratives and history, and you know, just like very interested in the body and what is muscle memory, you know, and what is passed on. I have like I mean, you know this because we work together on Melee, but when it comes to the past and like what is passed on from generation to generation, like, and how it is passed on, and then how that shows up in the body. Like I remember in college, that's when I realized that, you know, only certain types of people suck their teeth, you know. And I found that fascinating. I was like, oh my God, like white people don't really suck their teeth.
No,
like
sure.
they don't, you know. And I was like, why is that? Like I thought everybody used to do that, you know. Like it's such a natural thing that happens. And I was like, wow, like certain things that we do are remnants of our ancestors and we don't even realize it, you know. And I found that so interesting because, you know, through the process of colonization, there was all of this intentional erasure of culture and language and identity and everything, you know. So it's like the things that were really able to remain, I feel like, are the real essences of who we are, because you cannot erase essence no matter what you try to do.
Facts.
You know.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that comes out in dance. You know, you put on a drum beat and all the people in the room, their heads start bobbing.
Yeah, sure.
You know. And so
Yeah,
it's
sure.
like there's a magic
Without
in it.
saying.
Without saying.
Yeah.
Without saying. Literally, like there's a magic in it. Like working with kids, it's like I put on a song and you just see all of them start reacting, you know, and then they start riffing off of each other. And then, I mean, it's annoying sometimes because they don't pay attention, you know, but it's innate. It's in them, you know. And I just feel like using dance as a way of exploring memory has been very, very eye-opening for me. And so, yeah, like once I realized that dance could be that tool, like it took off, you know, like that was like my thing.
That's beautiful, man. So my question for you based on that is, you know, dance, unlike other art expressions, seem to be the most entertaining yet least appreciated or compensated in particular. So what are your thoughts on how society perceives this genre?
It's very, I'm so glad you said that. Because it's true, you know, it's so, people love dance, people love dancers, people love watching dance, you know. It's like every single like big performance that you can think of art, there's always dance included. But people don't like to pay for dance. It's very interesting that something can be so loved yet so undervalued. And I think part of it is accessibility. People feel that anybody could dance, you know? It's like when you watch a dancer, like maybe you don't say it out loud, but in your head, you're like, I could do that, you know? And just that thought makes you underappreciate like exactly how much work goes into it. And then you're just not willing to pay that much for it, you know? It's like if someone's playing an instrument, then it's like all of a sudden there's a huge appreciation for it because instrumentation is so hard, reading music is so hard, you know. But I guess dancing, they see it as I don't want to say easy, but like they have easy access to it, you know. Like everybody can dance, but they don't see the training, they don't see the work. And then when they try to do what you're doing, that's when they realize how difficult it is, what you're doing. Yeah. You know?
Even if it's just a minute.
Yeah, and the other thing is like people are spoiled, you know. I feel like for a long time the culture of dance, like we haven't really advocated for ourselves in terms of how much we should be paid, how much, you know, because it's like part of it is you don't want to box yourself out of the market, you know. You don't want to say, okay, my price is $500, and then they're like, whoa, we can't pay that, and then they go to the person next door who will pay $50, you know, and then they get the job, you know, because then you're stuck with nothing. So part of it is that like we don't advocate for ourselves, and we undercut ourselves, you know. But then part of it is just, you know, like people need to really appreciate what is dance and what goes into it, and all of the thought process, all of the practice, all of the studio hours, all of the rehearsals, the technique, everything, you know. Yeah, so I think that's kind of what it is. And on St. Martin, it can be a real issue. Like, a real, it can be a real issue trying to get paid, like, what you're actually worth. And what it does is it makes it very difficult to be a dancer. You know, I know a couple musicians who are musicians full time. I I don't know if I know any dancers who are dancers full time, you know, without any kind of supplementary income like teaching or yoga or something, you know, like just dance
But
full time, you know,
strictly
like
dance.
performing. Like there's nobody who's a full time dancer on St. Martin, you know, and that's crazy.
Yeah, I'm just thinking as I'm listening to you because, I think about the ways in which we push, ourselves as an entertainment island, but then, culture in a sense is often left out, and and that culture as in the old time ways of doing things, but the relevance of, art forms such as dance, So I'm curious then, given what you said about your take on school, basically, having then delved into dancing and whatnot. What was it like coming back home and deciding, what you would have done, and also establishing your career?
Sure. So I must say that when I was living abroad, I was not a full-time dancer. I had a 9 to 5 job, actually a very well-paying 9 to 5 job. I was working as a consultant, and I was dancing on the side, and it was draining me. It was so difficult trying to do both, and I was pretty much like, listen, I don't want to do this anymore. This consulting work is not doing anything for me besides a paycheck, so I want to pursue dance full time. So my plan was to move back home for 1 year. And during that time, I was going to work with the National Institute of Arts Dance Company. And I would, set a piece on them. We'd have a show. It would be great. And then during that 1 year, I would, figure out what I want to do next. That was the plan. It was a very temporary thing. So I emailed the National Institute of Arts, and they responded very, exciting, and they were like super happy to have me and work with the company. But they did tell me that, listen, like, we're not going to be able to pay you like a living wage if that's the only thing you're doing. Like, if you're only working with the dance company, like, the amount of hours you're going to put in is not enough to pay you, So they were like, would you mind teaching while you're here as well? So that's how I started teaching at St. Dominic, at Charlotte Brookson Academy, and at NIA. I also teach dance, And I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine, like, as long as I don't have to work on 9 to 5, like, we good, because then I would just be going from one draining situation to the next, And so I came back, and I was really lucky to have that job waiting for me when I came back. And that was the whole reason I came back, And then my plans, everything was going according to plan. Everything was happening. Everything was lining up. I was working with a dance company. I was actually going to bring another dance company from Minneapolis to St. Martin. We were going to have a joint show. It was going to be this amazing, connection of different arts and stories and people and identities, and just, bring them all together in this bridging of worlds. And, everything was going according to plan. Funding was happening, which is crazy, because that was, a very big undertaking. And then COVID hit, and everything went up in flames, COVID hit 2 weeks before the show was supposed to happen. 1 week before the dancers from Minneapolis were supposed to come.
Wow.
It was timing, crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And airport shut down, everything shut down. We went into lockdown, and I was depressed. I was really depressed. And it was a very difficult time for me, because I just felt like everything was lining up, and then it wasn't. It's like, for everything to go so well, just to crumble, it's hard to swallow. It really was hard to swallow. And I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. So for a long time, like, in the early days of COVID, they were like, oh, by June you're gonna be gone, by July you're gonna be gone. It's just a couple of months.
Yeah.
June come and gone, COVID
Yeah,
still
we
here.
haven't flattened the curve.
Like,
And the curve just kept
oh my
roller
god,
coastering.
the
Yeah.
messaging is
Yeah, that's a whole nother discussion.
yeah, and that's how the film idea came into play, so
You adapted.
we adapted. My dancers, they're young, they're all high school or like just out of high school age, like the oldest is like 21, I think. And so they were all getting ready to make moves too, I was only supposed to be here for a year. They were getting ready to leave or go on to school or whatever. And so I was like, listen, if we don't make a move soon, I'm going to lose my cast. And so we decided, I was like, okay, like, let's just make a film. It's going to be a visual album. Like, my inspiration was, Beyonce's Lemonade, where she had, like, the different songs and different locations, and, so I was like, okay, we'll do something like that, like, each dance that we have choreographed, like, we'll film it in a different location, and it'll be, like, all put together, and then all of the inspiration and the research that we did, I also put it into the film. Because if it was the live show, the audience wouldn't get to see like the backstories. So for example, in the film, like I put snippets of Morris Bishop's speech or Aimé Césaire, his like that was inspiration that I gave to the dancers so they would know what they were dancing about, but it wasn't necessarily meant for the audience. But I was like, okay, since we're doing a film, then I can include stuff like that and make it more like documentary style almost.
It was, it's beautiful. I have flashbacks of it. Man, that was an amazing project. And for that to be 100% locally created, man, bro, that was amazing.
Thank you. It was, and so it came out of hardship, it came out of desperation. It was a matter of sink or swim, and so.
Which you have experience in, like, you got your life. You have your lifesaver badge right now, basically.
Right, yeah.
Gotcha. So, from the time you came with it, was it already deemed Atlantis Rebirth?
No. So, the show that I did in Minneapolis was called Atlantis 13.
Okay.
And so the idea with that show was it was 12 of the Twin Cities' finest dancers, and we were all telling stories of what our utopia would look like, so it's like if we were to live in a world that was perfect, that we consider a liberated world or a decolonized world, what would that look like, and so we were telling it from the perspective of Black folks living in the US, which is a very specific experience. And then what I wanted to do basically was to take that same concept and translate it into a Caribbean version. So it's like from a Caribbean perspective, what does utopia look like? What does liberation look like? Like, what are the struggles that we have specifically, because I saw how powerful the work was up there. And I was like, St. Martin could use something like this. Like, we could do something like this, and so I brought that back here. Because, when I left St. Martin, I was not coming back. Like, I wasn't. I didn't see myself living here,
Gotcha.
I felt like it wasn't for me. I felt like it like, I don't know, life was difficult. Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
So was it in a sense like you didn't feel that strong an attachment, or just you just aspired greater?
I don't know if it's the attachment per se. I felt like I felt caged.
I feel you.
I felt like I couldn't really exist in the way that I wanted to exist, which is why when I left, that feeling of liberation, it's sad that I had to leave to experience that, when your home is not a place where you feel open to be all parts of yourself, that's an issue, and so even when I came back, I was like, I've never lived in St. Martin as an adult. I don't know what this is going to be like, so it was also a question to me of, can I live here?
What do you see yourself?
can I see myself here?
Yeah.
And now I can't see myself nowhere else. So it's like now, even if I leave again, it's like I know St. Martin, I have to come back.
Yeah,
I have to come back because it's like, so there was a real flip for me in terms of that mindset, but it didn't always start out like that. But I always said, if I do come back, I need to have something to offer. I don't want to be one of those people who come back and come back to do what?
Yeah. Come back and complain only.
Yeah, you just sitting in your mother's house unemployed. Like, no, I can't do that.
And that's fair, Yeah.
Yes.
It's more than fair.
So I was glad the way that it happened. I'm very privileged in that sense to, have a job waiting on me and then, have that job actually work out.
Mm-hmm.
And shout out to the National Institute of Arts, like, for real. Because they really took me under their wing and made all of this happen. I have a really good relationship with my boss, Miss Arlene. And yeah, like it was so easy to do the things that I wanted to do,
mm-hmm.
I'm really not a person who likes micromanagement, like at all. And so this was it was perfect, it was perfect. She let me do whatever Atlantis needed to do, it was good. It was good.
Nice. Okay, so we're going to take our final break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. This is the News Behind the News with Ralph Kintav on Mix 94.7 FM. And this afternoon, I'm joined with Mr. Jonathan Van Arneman. And so, one thing that comes to mind, Jonathan, as we kind of talked about earlier, was the matter of compensation and, financing such projects. So what was it like, getting support, whether it be sponsorship, the actual selling of tickets, for the live viewing of the film that he ended up creating, opposed to the theater show, and getting it all together.
It was hard. It was very difficult. I mean, part of it was because I wasn't intending to make a film. I wasn't thinking like that. It's like
gotcha.
If it's a live show, when you're thinking about sponsorship, when you're thinking about things like that, like you think about sponsoring a venue, you think about, like drinks there, you think, like stuff like that. Like, but you're not thinking about like production costs and
editing
and
lights,
yes,
gotcha.
all of
Transportation,
that, exactly. So it was difficult. Thankfully, there was a grant made available by the Prince Bernard Cultural Funds,
nice.
specifically for art that was affected during COVID. And so we were able to apply for that, and we got some funding. It wasn't much, but we got some funding for that. And so, we were able to give the dancers a little something. But I cannot say that the dancers were paid. Like, what we paid them compared to what they did.
Yeah, I understand.
Peanuts, and it's like, and it's difficult. Like, I think because they were already a part of the National Institute of Arts, they already had a relationship there. They take classes there. They grew up in that studio. It's like
those are like a camaraderie as well.
Exactly, you know. But if these were like professional dancers that were just there for this project, like, they would have walked.
You would have no dancers. I understand.
And it was difficult. It's hard because, especially me, somebody who values paying artists what they're worth, and it's like, but then you have a project and you have no budget, and it's like, what you gonna do? And shout out to the dancers too, because they stuck with me. They didn't have to, but they did anyway. They signed up for a 6-month project and it turned into 2 years, like, So
that says a lot about commitment.
Yeah, they were committed to the vision, to the art, to the everything, and they really made the project what it was, because they're phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal artists. And so, yeah, my hat's off to them for sure.
Cool. So I know that you also submitted this film to a festival. Can you explain what that experience is like, the process in doing so, and what we can do to further touch the world, so to speak, from St. Martin with our art?
Sure. Okay, so the film, bits of the film were featured in Coco Dance Festival. So Coco Dance Festival is out of Trinidad and Tobago. And
Nice.
actually, they're usually live. So they usually take live submissions. But because of COVID, they decided to do online submissions. So because of that, we were able to submit to that festival and have our work shown alongside amazing art from the rest of the Caribbean and the world, actually. They had a lot of different submissions from international artists. And so I was very thankful for that. Sonia Dumas is the dancer out of Trinidad and Tobago who is responsible for that. I am trying to get the film to other festivals. The thing is, I'm not a filmmaker. I learned so much about filming and editing and all of these things through this process, but I still have so much to learn in terms of like what quality is the film in, like what is it shot in, like the ratio, the frames, the blah 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 blah. And so a lot of these film festivals are asking for like very specific details, and
Gotcha.
I'm just like, yeah, I didn't see this coming, It's just like we were just trying to get this out. And I mean, Maureen Kaye, shout out to Maureen. She did an amazing job with the videography. Amazing. Every time people watch it, they're like, that videographer, like, you got to keep her.
Yep.
So she did an amazing job. And again, everything is completely local, completely St. Martin. St. Martin dancers, St. Martin editing, St. Martin videography, St. Martin... not all of the songs are from St. Martin, but we did have St. Martin artists on the soundscape. We had Shanti, we had Empress Z, we had Elton Richardson, and of course Clara and Lavon. So legends on the soundtrack, and they recorded Sweet Salt just for the soundtrack because there was no official recording of Sweet Salt. It was just like there was like a YouTube clip, but there was no official recording. And so Papa Umpu, who's the composer of the song, he gave them permission to do an official recording, and they did that. Shout out to Alex Piper, who let us use his studio. Like, the community was just coming through, It was such a village that really just came together and created this film. And I'm just so thankful, so thankful for everything. So, I mean, when something is created with that much love and support, it has no choice but to succeed, And so right now I'm in talks with Claudio Arnell. He has an exhibit at Axum. And so we're planning to do a screening of it in the Axum exhibit. So there's also going to be like an interaction of his visual art versus the film. So I mean, it's still living, it's still happening. Things are still, popping off and things like that. But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Gotcha. So I know that you've been one who strongly advocates, for more of a history to be taught in schools, and you do find ways to integrate it in your teaching of dance. But in your take, how do we connect that knowledge of the past and making it relevant for this generation especially?
Definitely. I think once the kids know the stories, they're going to do something with it, It's just like with my dancers at NIA, it's like once I told them these stories and these histories, they were like, what? It's like, it's a mind-blowing thing of just like, that happened here, or like, that's the Caribbean story, or and that's all you have to do. You just have to give them the information. They're going to post about it. They're going to create art about it. They're going to, and it's just like, you just have to give them the tools and the knowledge to do so, and they're going to do something with it. But if they don't know those stories, if they don't know that history, and if there's no value in it, like part of the reason I didn't see myself coming back to St. Martin was because I didn't understand the richness and the value of St. Martin culture and heritage because it was not taught to me in school, And so we're really doing these kids a disservice, and we're doing the island a disservice by not telling them who they are and where they come from. And I think that is so quintessential, it's like, and that needs to start early because honestly, high schoolers are the most skeptical people in the world. Like, if you're going to wait till high school to start educating kids, it's too late. That has to start from primary school. Like, they have to grow up proud. That pride, it starts way early, I think, after you grow up, there's kind of like a second awakening, and then you're again open to different ideas and things like that. But high schoolers are stubborn, man. They're not trying to change their mind on anything. So yeah, I'm trying. That doesn't mean you don't try. And sometimes you don't think they're absorbing things, but they are. But it needs to be a federal approach. It can't be individual teachers, because then it's like, what if I don't teach you? Then you're just not gonna know the stuff. You're not gonna learn that. As thank God there's some teachers out there who are trying to implement this stuff, but it needs to be a nationwide approach.
That's right.
Otherwise, it's not gonna be fruitful.
That's right. Because on that same thought, I'm curious about your take on teaching itself. And what has stood out to you as an instructor, and how do you bridge, how do you bridge the difference in generational events, while teaching your students? Because I know, of course, like particularly, like, let's say the lingo has changed. I'm sure that they've definitely taught you some things, and so how do you use that in teaching, and what has stood out to you the most?
Yeah, things have definitely changed. Like, I remember one time I said, like, gang, gang, They were like, oh my God, that's so cringe. I was like, what? Like, no one says that anymore, Is that not a thing? So it's really interesting to hear, like, the phrases and things that they still keep, but others that they have, like, let go, or like, oh, that's still like 5 years ago. I'm just like, what? It's quite interesting. I love learning from the kids. The kids teach me so much. And I think that, it's really lucky of me to be able to get that as my reintroduction to the island, because that has given me, like, such a clear image of in what ways we've grown since I left in 2010. In what ways have we grown, and in what ways are we still exactly the same? Just listening to the way that the high schoolers speak, like what do they talk about? How do they see themselves? It's just like, in some ways we've come a long way, a long way. Like, just hearing their language, it's just like, whoa, like, this is cool. I dig this. And a lot of that is due to, there's more access to knowledge through social media, like, you have all these, like, little informational videos and people ranting and so, like, so they're getting information from social media. And then some things are exactly the same. We have not changed. We got a long way to go. And so it was both encouraging, but also like, yikes, But I will also say that if I had that same upbringing and I turned out okay, and I left and I was able to, like, come away thinking differently, like, they'll be okay too, Yeah, that being said, that's not to say that we can't do better.
Yeah, for sure.
We can definitely do better. We can definitely do better. And I feel like part of it is our teachers, Part of it is our teachers. I feel like teachers are doing the best they can with what they have.
Yeah.
But you need to give your teachers tools. Like, St. Martin is a place where we have a lot of teachers from different islands and different countries, and it's not to say that they're not curious about St. Martin. They too are curious. I had a unity flag on my car one time, and one of my coworkers was just like, "What flag is that? I've never seen that flag." And then I explained it, and then she's like, "Oh, okay," And so it's like, you need to give teachers the tools to help our students, like, if we can have courses for the teachers on St. Martin culture, St. Martin history, even teachers from St. Martin, because sometimes you grow up on St. Martin, you don't know that stuff,
It's true.
So giving teachers the tools so that they can then pass that on to the students, because it's not that they don't want to, but they can't pass on something that they don't have. And so, again, it needs to be top down. It really needs to be top down.
Gotcha. Okay, so my final question for you is, given your goals, what is your regimen like when it comes to personal improvement and growth?
Oh, drag me. Personal improvement and growth. That is a great question. Do I grow, Ralph? Do I really grow? I don't know. I don't know. JK. So I think self-reflection is so important. And I think creating art keeps you honest. You know, I can always tell the mindset I was in when I look back on art that I created. And sometimes I cringe. You know, sometimes you look back on work that you created or work that you were a part of and you're like, yikes, you know, and sometimes you look back on work that you created and you're like, whoa, you know, if the work that you created is still relevant today, it's still giving you life, it's still pouring, you know, it's like when I look back on Atlantis 13, every time I watch it, I get something new. Every time I watch Atlantis Rebirth, I see something new. I get a new concept. I understand myself better. Like, oh, like, that's what this was. Like, because, I mean, when you're creating it, you don't always fully understand the full picture. You're just tapped into source, you know, like you're listening to spirit, listening to the universe, listening to God, and you're just going, you know, hoping that it makes sense. Afterwards, when you're watching it, it's like, oh my God, this makes sense now, you know? But it takes some time. But when you don't have those moments, you know that you were creating out of ego and not out of being a vessel, you know? And so I remember I was having a conversation with Sharice Piper, amazing artist. And she was saying, you know, our issue is that we're not playing with God, you know? It's like we were placed on this earth to play with God. And as a creator, I'm always like, am I playing with God right now? You know, like, cause it's so true. Like we need to create not out of ourselves. Like we are literal, I mean, we're placed here to create. Like we are creative beings, all of us, you know? But that creation needs to come from the right source. And so I feel like just trying to tap into that always and trying to always make sure that this is not about me. It's so much greater than me, you know? I am a vessel and the work that I create needs to reflect that. Yeah, so trying to just make sure I'm always playing with God. Like literally, if you watch me before a performance, I'm like, play with God, play with God, play with God. It's like a mantra, you know? Yeah, because it's important. And you can always tell, like, yeah.
Okay, appreciate that, man. Thanks for that self-reflective moment as well. So to our viewers and listeners, I'd like to thank you so much for tuning into today's program. I do hope that you were inspired and that it was also informative. So be sure to tune in again tomorrow and take care.